they did was to establish an area of their quarters for the care of the sick. And this became, in time, a hospital at the fort. And from this point on, there was some medical care. Um, but, uh, One of the first physicians who came to work at Fort Smith with the military was Dr. J.H.T. Main. And in time, the fort was closed. And when it was in the 1830s, Dr. Main remained to serve as a civilian physician for citizens of Fort Smith. Dr. Main was an active fellow who established uh, in later years a hotel known as the Hotel Main or Main Hotel, which was a major meeting place in Fort Smith until this century, the 20th century. In his later years, Dr. Main built a house for his daughter and her husband, Dr. Worth Bailey. Um, as you see, this was a fairly substantial house, and it was adequate to serve the Holdcroft Clinic in later years. And when I came to Fort Smith in 1969, this house was the home of the Holdcroft Clinic, which one of my friends told me was the medical monolith of Western Arkansas. Um, but we'll get into a little bit more about that as we go along. Another house which figured prominently in the history of Fort Smith medicine is now known as the Clayton House. And it was built by Dr. Springer and Dr. Sutton, who had a clothing store which burned down. But then the Civil War came, and when the Civil War came, Dr. Springer and Mr. Sutton left town for Texas, leaving a vacant house, which was utilized by the Federal Army for a hospital. And this hospital served several purposes. One of them, as the war ended, was to serve as a freedmen's hospital for the freed slaves and for refugees who were packing through town. Uh, but another impact of the Civil War on Fort Smith and Fort Smith medicine was that it um, brought in doctors from outside with various ideas. For instance, in a meeting of the Fort Sebastian County Medical Society a few years later, a doctor who had served during the Civil War said that he didn't really think that it was necessary to bleed a patient who had pneumonia, and that he had had 60 patients that he treated without bleeding during the Civil War in Fort Smith, and they did very well. So, although this was a revolutionary idea and one that was not readily accepted by some, um, you can see that fresh ideas came in with Civil War. I would like to mention one of the physicians in the area who was active in the organization of medical societies, and this was Dr. James A. Dibble Sr. on your left here. When he arrived in his 20s, he established himself as a formidable personage. He was only 5 feet 10 inches tall, but with a stovepipe hat, he was said to stand much taller than 5 feet 10, and he carried a golden headed cane. He made an effort to establish a county medical society in 1845. This did not quite work out, but after the Civil War, he was instrumental in establishing a county medical society and a state medical society. It is of interest that one of his sons um, moved to Little Rock and became active in founding UAMS, the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences. This was James A. Dibble Jr. He had to make his way on his own because his father had lost all of his fortune in the Civil War. But Dr. Dibble Jr. Taught anatomy and later served as president of the university and as a dean, and died early at age 58. This is his house in Little Rock on Spring Street. I took this picture a couple of years ago. It's still in use as a private residence. It was, among other things, Dr. Dibble was one who tinkered and had all sorts of modern conveniences and inconveniences in his house. So it's an interesting house. Back to Fort Smith. Let's see, yes. A hospital was established in Fort Smith in 1887. The occasion was that one of the railroad workers had an injury to his leg and it needed to be amputated because he had gangrene. The problem was that there was no place for him to have the operation because ordinarily in those days, surgery was done in the home, and being a transient railroad worker, he had no home. However, Father Dagan at St. John's Episcopal Church mobilized the ladies of the church to fix up a house which could be used as a hospital. And so the surgery was performed on the poor railroad worker's leg, and the location became known as St. John's Hospital. And Isaac Parker, the famous judge, was the first board chairman. And this was, as best we know, the first civilian hospital in Arkansas. This picture, you may not be able to see where it says smallpox as a warning there. Now, hospitals mixed and matched during around the turn of the century, and St. John's joined with another hospital to become known as Bell Point Hospital. And this is a picture of Bell Point Hospital. Subsequently, a local businessman named George Sparks made a generous gift to the Bell Point Hospital in 1908 of $25,000. And one stipulation of his gift was that it be named for his wife. This was his wife, and she was the daughter, one of the daughters of Dr. Dibble on the left. But Anne Eliza Dibble Sparks died early, and her husband named the hospital for her. Now, it was called Sparks Hospital, maybe for simplicity, for who knows for what reason. It was not called the Ann Sparks or Eliza Sparks or Ann Dibble Sparks or anything else. It was just Sparks Hospital. But we have to remember that it was named for a woman, even though it has the name of her husband. Another woman who figured prominently in the history of medicine in Fort Smith was Minnie Sanders, who was the first woman to practice medicine, perhaps in Arkansas. She began practice in Fort Smith in 1892. Among her credentials was when she lived in the Midwest in Illinois, she served on a jury, which was distinctly unusual and again, probably a first for a woman to serve on a jury. The problem was that they could not find 12 men to serve on the jury. And so the judge decided that Minnie Sanders could be considered a person. And as a person, she could serve on the jury, so that there were 12 persons on the jury, and she served. Her medical career was rather short-lived in that when she married Henry Clay Armstrong in 1895, she gave up her medical practice. The other hospital that developed along this time was St. Edward's Infirmary. And so St. Edward and Sparks became the two primary hospitals in Fort Smith. This new building was built in 1905 by the Sisters of Mercy. And in years later, this building was replaced in the 1920s. We'll see a picture of it later. I would like to quickly go down to Paris, Arkansas, and actually to Chisholmville, which is near Paris, where Dr. Jim Smith began his practice in 1880. Actually, Dr. Jim Smith's grandson, J.C. Smith, took me out to Chisholmville one afternoon where I took this picture of the log cabin where Dr. Jim Smith began his practice of medicine in 1880. He was joined in practice by his brother, Mac Smith. And as it happened, Jim Smith taught his brother Mac how to read and write, and subsequently taught him a good bit of medicine. But the two brothers did go to medical school, Nashville, Philadelphia, various places, and one would go to school while the other would stay and work. Their practice in those days was largely one of riding out on horseback. They would start out in the morning. One would go in one direction, one would go in the other. When they would see a sheet flying out of a window of a cabin, they would know that the sheet meant they needed help, and so they would stop there. They not only saw the sick, but one of their major purposes was to deal with trauma. And one of the frequent sources of trauma was being kicked in the head by a mule. I say that because at the time, in the late 20th century, there were still a couple of men around Paris with steel plates in their head that had been placed by Dr. Jim Smith. This surgery was done preferably under a shade tree. They preferred working under a shade tree to working in the kitchen because there was less danger of contamination if you were outside. Eventually, they began to move indoors. They built a hospital in Paris in 1913, and then later in 1926, they built a three-story annex, which you'll see on the left, to this hospital, which became an institution in Paris. You can almost say that young women went to the Paris hospital to become a nurse and never left. They were educated there. They had their room and board there. Rules were strict, and they were taught by the doctors and by the nurses what their duties were. This is a picture of Dr. Mack and Dr. Jim Smith. And these were, well, they were fairly legendary figures. Another who was perhaps even more legendary was Dr. Mack's. This was Dr. Mack on the left. His son, Dr. John Smith. Dr. John Smith was the oldest of three brothers who worked in Paris. Dr. John Smith went to Tulane for his medical education, came back, established a pathology laboratory in the basement of the hospital there, did his own radiology. One result of that was you see a prosthesis on his left arm. That was because he developed cancer in his left hand from using his left hand to position patients in front of the fluoroscope. And actually, he died from the cancer from that cancer. And as he got more ill, he left home, went to the hospital. They put him up on the third floor of the hospital, which was vacant. He lived there for 3 weeks until he died. Dr. Smith was one of those who was a universal genius. Sometimes just for a change of pace, he would go to the local garage and ask him if he could work on a car or two. And when he got one new vehicle one time, he took it all apart, put it on the floor of the garage and said, now let's put it back together. Also, Paris was the site of a number of coal mines, and Dr. Smith was known to go into the mines and climb in his suit and tie, climb up and down the pits to help take care of miners who were injured. An interesting thing that he did in Paris was to establish a prepaid health program, so that a miner's family could pay $2, subsequently $3 a month, and they would get health care for free. Well, for that fee, that would take care of their health care. Of course, this was in the 1920s. It was anathema to the American Medical Association, and Dr. Smith resigned from the Medical Association. This system actually was employed at a colonial hospital at the Colonial Hospital in Fort Smith. There were similar problems there. Eventually, the Colonial Hospital closed in the early 1930s. This was Dr. Jim Smith, the youngest of the second generation of brothers. And this is a picture of I'll have to go through this fairly quickly, a picture of the operating room in the hospital. The thing is that the hospital closed in 1973. And when it closed, they just walked out, and that was that. And it so happened that about, some years later, it was 2013, my friend J.P. Bell, who was a retired internist and a noted photographer, asked me if I wanted to go with him down to Paris to see his friend and classmate J.C. Smith to take some pictures of the hospital. And in 2013, when JC and JP and I went through the Paris hospital, JC turned on the lights in the old operating room, and this was it. This was, it was kind of a place that time forgot. J.P. Bell took these photographs. This is the microscope that the Smith brothers used. This was the autoclave. This was their electrocardiogram machine. And this was the air conditioning unit in the operating room. And this was the communication system for notifying one of the doctors that a patient was in labor. There was a different ring for each physician. And so when the patient was ready to deliver, the nurse rang the bell for the specific doctor. This was J.C. Smith on the day that we were down there. As far as I know, J.C. is still practicing surgery, but he was the third and the last generation of the Smith brothers to operate there. I would like to shift gears a little bit to tell you about two major health problems that afflicted the state, the country, and this area in the early 20th centuries. One of them was influenza. And this is a famous photograph from Camp Eberly in Lone Oak, Arkansas, of a hospital area for treating patients with the flu, which caused the pandemic of 1918. It occurred first in soldiers, but it quickly spread throughout the state. And my friend Sam Taggart provided me this slide of the medications which were used for treating the flu. And the point is, of course, that none of them worked. The doctors worked very hard. Many of them contracted and even died with flu, and they saw the sick, but there was little that they could actually do to alter the course of the disease. The only thing that was the least bit helpful was to provide nursing care. And as you'll see in this notice in the Fort Smith newspaper, the Fort Smith Red Cross chapter was pleading for volunteers to serve as nurses. Anybody who would be willing to serve as a nurse was needed, and they did. And many of these, of course, came down with the disease themselves. The disease was, this flu epidemic was a bit like a prairie fire, which just came through. And in October, there was a steep spike in mortality. This was experienced in Fort Smith as throughout the state. and Fort Smith went on quarantine. Practically every city in the state was on quarantine. This was very tedious for the merchants who wanted to get back to business. The other group who found it very tedious was the Ministerial Association, because they did not like to have the churches closed for the quarantine. But perhaps a little bit early, the quarantine was lifted, and you can see in this advertisement in the newspaper that the lid was off. Come back today, and come this week if possible. There was only one location in Arkansas that was unaffected by the flu, and this was the Arkansas Tuberculosis Sanatorium at Boonville. The sanatorium in Boonville was a isolated place. It was self-sufficient. It had its own food supplies, everything else. And so they simply shut it down. Nobody in, nobody out. And as a result, there were no cases of flu at the Boonville Sanatorium. That does lead us to the other major health challenge in the early 20th century, which was tuberculosis. And this is a classic photograph of the Boonville Sanatorium, which in time became the largest sanatorium in the country. The idea was that if you took people away from their home and put them in a sanatorium and provided a fresh air, clean living conditions, they would get well quicker. And they probably did. The interesting thing is that they were never able to prove it. A number of studies were made in retrospect, and it was difficult to assess and really impossible to prove that sanatoriums really changed the natural history of tuberculosis. This was a postcard showing an aerial view of the tuberculosis sanatorium. There was also a branch of the sanatorium in Fort Smith known as the Wildcat Branch. It was located on Wildcat Mountain. It so happened that in the early 1930s, the WPA established some barracks on this location to house workers for the WPA who were doing public works, such as building the Sebastian County Courthouse. This photograph was taken by Bob McCann in 1937 of a branch of the Boonville Sanatorium, which was built on this site. It housed 100 patients. The Boonville Sanatorium had a building that housed over 500 patients, and even that was not enough. And so they built this branch. It actually was used for treating terminal patients, and it served its purpose. Interestingly, this photograph shows a couple of three-story buildings on this site. The sanatorium at Boonville and at Wildcat Mountain served their purpose. This is a photograph of my late friend Joe Irwin standing by one of the two pillars, which is all that is left of the WPA barracks and of the original Wildcat Mountain Sanatorium. He has his hand in a ring, to which was fixed a chain, and the chain went across to the other pillar, and supposedly that was what closed the sanatorium. I don't think anybody really wanted to go there anyway. This is the plate which shows that in 1936 it was built by the Works Progress Administration. This is a postcard of the Wildcat Mountain Sanatorium, and Actually, I found this in an antique shop. My wife and I were in Seattle for a friend's wedding, and while Mary and her friend were piddling around, I was wandered through an antique shop and looked through some old postcards, and one of them showed the Wildcat Mountain Sanatorium in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So for $1.50, I became the owner of this postcard, and it shows what the sanatorium was like in its heyday in the late 1930s. Sanatoriums eventually, as I said, served their purpose. Our late friend Joe Bates was instrumental in demonstrating to the state and to the nation and to the world that antibiotics could be used for treating tuberculosis without the necessity of sanatorium care. Um, and in uh, in Fort Smith, the Wildcat Mountain branch was closed, and it was acquired by the Methodist Church for a nursing home, which was built in 1960. And this is the Methodist Village Senior Living today on the same site that the Wildcat Mountain Sanatorium occupied in the 1940s and 50s. I mentioned that one of the interesting features of medical care in Fort Smith was that it was a site of two clinics. The first of these was established by St. Cloud Cooper. This is a photograph of Dr. Cooper, and he grew up in Texas and Missouri, attended medical school at Washington University, began practice of medicine in Texas. And the story is, this is legend, that he was riding through Fort Smith on a train, got off to change, excuse me, to change trains. While walking through town, he was standing at the corner of 13th and Garrison Street when he saw a horse and buggy making a turn. The driver of the buggy was well dressed with a lap robe over his lap. The horse was well appointed, was stepping very nimbly. And Dr. Cooper later said, "I decided if a town like this was satisfactory for such a man as that, it would be okay for me." So he decided to move to Fort Smith. He told that story to Robert Meek, who was the man in the carriage, and Robert Meek went on to develop the Coca-Cola bottling company, which is still operated by the Meeks in Fort Smith today. But Dr. Cooper came to Fort Smith in the early 1900s, served in World War I, and during World War I became impressed with how medical care in the Army was organized. He also became aware of the Mayo Clinic, which had only acquired its name in 1914. It was still a young institution. But Dr. Cooper and two colleagues, Doctors Foster and Wolferman, went to Rochester, Minnesota in 1919 and visited the clinic and established that they wanted to establish the same type of clinic for care in Fort Smith. Now, of course, Cooper Clinic never achieved the position that Mayo Clinic did, but the idea was that patients could be cared for by a group of doctors, not just one, and a bill would be sent to the patient from the clinic, not from the individual doctor. And if Dr. Cooper, say, needed to consult with Dr. Wolferman, the patient would see Dr. Wolferman, but he would receive no extra bill for the consultation. He would only get one bill from the clinic. The doctors were paid a percentage of their income. Each doctor had a percentage which was determined. And actually, we have some insight into that because a few years ago, as Cooper Clinic was preparing to merge with Mercy in 2017, I was in the office of the Cooper Clinic talking with my friend, the secretary, Elaine Milliken, and asked her about, wasn't there a box of clinic memorabilia? And so she went back and fished it out, and there were 5 cardboard boxes, and it included the minutes of the Cooper Clinic going back to the first meeting in 1920, and also with the original bylaws, all handwritten, which was a great gold mine for getting original documentation of how the clinic was organized and begun. When Dr. Cooper and 5 younger colleagues established Cooper Clinic in 1920, they already had the property to build a building, but it was not finally completed until 1924. And actually, this building at the corner of 11th Street and Rogers is where I started when I started practicing. I joined the Cooper Clinic in 1969. Cooper Clinic moved out of this building in 1972, and it later served as a headquarters for the area AHEC, Area Health Education, and but then the building was torn down, and it is now the site is much reduced. It has the sign for the Cadence Bank, which is next door. This is a photograph of Dr. Cooper with his wife and one of his daughters. A close inspection of a rather blurry photograph shows he had a cigar. It seems that all the old heroes were steady smokers, and most of them paid the price with a premature death. This is the iconic photograph of Dr. Cooper, which hangs. It did hang in the Cooper Clinic. It still is persisting in a corner of the Mercy Tower building. Dr. Cooper was older than the others. He was 60 years old when the clinic was founded, and his young partners were in their early 30s. So he was the senior partner. The Cooper Clinic was not the only clinic. About six or 8 months after the Cooper Clinic was founded, Dr. Charles Holt established the Holt Clinic. You know, it's one of those things we have no idea. Did Charles Holt and St. Cloud Cooper talk to each other about the idea of a clinic? Did Dr. Cooper invite Dr. Holt to join the Cooper Clinic? Did Dr. Holt decide he wanted to do that himself? We don't know, but whatever. He established the Holt Clinic also in the late 1920s. It was not organized on the Mayo Clinic plan. It was just simply a business. Four or 5 other doctors joined Dr. Holt, but they joined as employees, and they were hired by him as physicians in the clinic. That system lasted until Fred Kroc came, and I've shown this picture because Fred Kroc with St. Cloud Cooper are the 2 people whom I think established the pattern of medicine in Fort Smith, which was a unique one in the area at that time. Fred Kroc grew up in Ohio, attended medical school at Western Reserve, later at Stanford, and later he did his training in Johns Hopkins. At Johns Hopkins, he trained in OB/GYN under Howard Kelly, who was the father of GYN in the United States. And in 1927, Fred Kroc obtained his credentials in gynecology and was ready to practice his specialty. Unfortunately, the Depression was coming on. There was not very much of a demand for a gynecologist. At this time, Charles Holt had put out an advertisement looking for a surgeon. Fred Kroc answered this, and as it make a long story short, Fred Kroc came to Fort Smith, joined Charles Holt, and he scrubbed with Charles Holt and attained his credentials in surgery. And he also, when he came, was able to do much else. He had a lot of other things. He had done some radiology moonlighting during his training, and so he did his own X-rays until they were able to find a radiologist. After a few years, Dr. Kroc told Dr. Holt that he was going to have to leave because he was still making $300 a month and he could not afford a new house for his wife on that. And since he had not had a raise in the several years he had been there, he would have to leave Fort Smith. Dr. Holt said no. What Charles Holt did was to tell Dr. Kroc that they would establish a partnership, and it would be called the Holt-Kroc Clinic, and Dr. Kroc would be a partner. And with that, the Holt-Kroc Clinic changed from a proprietorship to a partnership. And the important thing about Dr. Kroc being in on this partnership was that Dr. Kroc was being well trained himself, was eager to find new physicians wherever they were who were well qualified to come and join him in this clinic, and he succeeded in that. This was housed the Holt-Kroc Clinic in the 1930s until it moved into the house that I showed you a little bit earlier. This is the portrait of Dr. Holt, Dr. Kroc, which stood in the Holt-Kroc, which hung in the Holt-Kroc Clinic. Unfortunately, things changed, times changed, and the portraits of the founders went down to the basement where they were last seen. This is the similar portrait of Dr. Holt, I'm sorry. And this is a photograph sent to me by Dr. Kroc's son, Curtis, showing his father feeding the birds in his retirement. He was a universal genius, could do many things, played the piano, made violins, had a shortwave radio. He had multiple interests. A wonderful man. I heard him make a speech at the Rotary Club one time about making violins, and I was not very tactful. I asked if he played the violin, and he said no, and that was all he said. And I thought that was curious that he would make violins and not know how to play it. What he did not say was that he could play the cello and he could play the piano. I'll quickly describe some of those who kept the Cooper Clinic in business during those days. This is Dr. Everett Foster, one of the founders, along with Dr. Cooper. I'll just go quickly through these pictures, and because I would like to leave time for questions if possible. Dr. Foster had a ranch outside of town. He grew up near Fort Smith. He was not always as stern as he was in the operating room. He was known to throw things into utter obscenities at times, but the ladies in the office were able to get him to let his guard down a little bit during a Christmas party here. Another great hero was Dr. Sid Wolferman, who joined Dr. Cooper in forming the Cooper Clinic. Sid Wolferman served in World War I. I love this photograph of Dr. Wolferman on the right. This is Dr. Wolferman. That is Dr. Brookshire, who was the radiologist, and I'll say a bit more about him. And this was their Dr. Wolfman's two daughters, the younger Liz Hoppert was the one who provided me with much of the information. She was a good friend. Dr. Brookshire's son is shown here. He would have been he was a third generation of doctors in the Brookshire family. And unfortunately, very shortly after he graduated from medical school in Little Rock, he was in an automobile crash and was killed. Davis Goldstein was another of the Cooper Clinic founders who was still living. He was still living actually when I came in 1969. He was a dermatologist. His practice was dermatology and syphilology. Incidentally, he also took care of the women in the red light district who had a separate entrance at the clinic for their convenience. Dr. Goldstein was a wonderful man. He was, many-faceted, very generous fellow. This is a picture of Dr. Goldstein at his retirement from the clinic, standing there in the middle of the group. This picture, Dr. Arliss Blair, not a founder, but also worked with the others in the early days of the clinic. I will quickly mention some of the doctors who came to Fort Smith after World War II in what I've called the post-war Renaissance, because this was what really brought a great deal of talent. And these people came from all over the country. John Olson, for example, was recruited by Fred Kroc, and Fred Kroc found John Olson in Philadelphia. Dr. Kroc was advertising for a Mayo Clinic trained surgeon, and Dr. Olson filled that qualification. When he came down to Fort Smith, he called his wife, Clemmy, who lived in Philadelphia, and her grandfather had been the originator of Heinz root beer. So she was of the Philadelphia main line. And John Olson told her that he was looking at a practice in Fort Smith. Fort Smith, where's that? It's in Arkansas. In Arkansas, where's Arkansas? It's in the South. The South, do they have palm trees? So with Dr. Olson overcame that handicap, and he and his wife moved here. Another surgeon who came is Carl Wilson, a urologist. He also came from New York and established urology at Holt Kroc. This is Bud Koenig, who went to Columbia University, was a native of New Jersey, and Fred Kroc brought him down. And this is Ernie Mendelsohn, who established radiology at Holt Kroc. He was a great gentleman. I was very fortunate whenever I found him in the X-ray department at Sparks when I went over, because he was very kind to a young doctor. He graduated from the University of Berlin. He was a German Jew who miraculously, and I don't know how, got out of Germany in the late 1930s as a German Jew and made it to New York, where he did his training in radiology, and Fred Kroc brought him down to Fort Smith to serve in radiology. Dr. Brookshire on the right, I've mentioned before. His father on the left preceded him in practice here. Dr. Brookshire was editor of the Journal of the Arkansas Medical Society for some 30 years. And from the 30s through the 50s, the Medical Society had its headquarters in Fort Smith. This Dr. Herbert Moulton, the first of 4 generations of Moultons who were ophthalmologists in Fort Smith. The one that I knew was Everett Moulton, and I don't have a picture of him. He was an outstanding doctor. He was trained in Boston at Harvard, as was his father. One of the great moments of anxiety in my practice was when I would see him for an annual physical, and felt obliged to use my ophthalmoscope to look in Dr. Moulton's eyes, and I was always a bit nervous about that. This is Wright Hawkins, who was a senior surgeon in Cooper Clinic. I'll just go through these quickly. that was the main hotel where his grandfather did much of his business. Ken Thompson was my senior partner. Lou Lambiot was another of my role models. He was an outstanding internist. He was went straight through Barnes, ward intern, all the honor societies. Zach Hornberger on the left had a war diary, served as first chief of staff at Sparks. R.C. Goodman was first anesthesiologist. Dr. Kroc brought him in. He came after serving in the war. Marlon Hogue, hardly have time to tell you about Marlon having a appendectomy. Marlon on the right, his father on the left. His father did an appendectomy on him when Marlon was a medical student. Unfortunately, there was no anesthesiology. He had to do it without anesthesia. He tried it again on his next patient, but it didn't work, so he didn't do it anymore. Bill Knight was first orthopedist. Tommy Foltz in family practices was his father. Art Martin, an internist who developed in his retirement, he developed the streetcar museum in Fort Smith. I don't have time to discuss Harry McDonald, who was a great servant for good in Fort Smith. I have a separate chapter and program about him. I'll just quickly, Dr. McDonald was a major role in integrating the schools in Fort Smith. That went to the Supreme Court. That's Harry in the middle there, a wonderful man. His daughter arranged for him to get a phone call from Bill Clinton just before he died because Harry was very sad at the time of his death. He had expected it. And don't have time to talk about Roger Boast. He was a pediatrician who was active in establishing health care for underserved in the state of Arkansas. Mutt Jones of Conway said that he was 90% backbone, such a run of a man. This is the Boast Center in Fort Smith. That's Dr. Boast on the left. And then quickly go through the hospitals in Fort Smith, the days of the nuns at St. Edward. Sparks was the largest hospital in the state at one time. And now it's Baptist. And I took this picture of the Cooper Clinic sign coming down as Mercy was establishing Tower West in 2017. This is what Mercy is doing now, establishing a new hospital. There is now an osteopathic college in Fort Smith. And I've concluded this by saying that just like in, you remember the movie Grand Hotel, people come, people go. In Fort Smith, clinics grow, clinics die. Hospitals change their names. One of them is sold 3 times. A new osteopathic college appears. People come, people go. Nothing ever changes. And that's my presentation. Where are we now?
Dr. Prewitt, I think we have a couple of minutes for we'll go over one since we started a little bit later, but we have a couple of minutes for people to ask questions. And if they'd like to do that, please use the chat feature and type it in the chat box. We do have a couple of comments that came in during your presentation. And I want to read those to you. One was from Ben Bolden at UAMS, and it says the dermatology library, I'm assuming he says here, I'm assuming at UAMS, is named for Dr. Goldstein.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Ben, I'm glad to hear from you. Ben, you're an old friend, and then father, I will tell you all, was my predecessor at Cooper Clinic, and a great man and great physician.
And then we have another comment from, let's see if I can get it to scroll up a little bit, from Amy, who says, very interesting talk about medicine in her hometown of Fort Smith. Seeing several members of my home church, First Methodist, and listening to the history of the hospitals and clinics brings back many great memories. And that you, Dr. Prewitt, knew her parents, Otto and Dorothy, and her last name is Doville.
Doville, yes.
And then
Oh,
plus your wife, Mary, taught her Sunday school.
oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
And then Malin up in Fayetteville says, ask where we can order your books. And that's a good segue because your books are on Amazon, correct?
Yes, they are.
So you could order from Amazon, but if you're in Little Rock on April 18th, we're going to do have a book signing, and Dr. Prewitt and I are going to have a conversation about his book at Wordsworth Books, which is in the Heights in Little Rock. And again, that's on April 18th. It begins at 6:30. And if you're in Little Rock, or you feel like driving down from Fayetteville or over from Fort Smith, I hope you'll come to Wordsworth. I think that's on I don't remember what day of a week that is, but hope people will come in and tune into that. It should be a very interesting talk, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation with you, Dr. Prewitt.
As am I. Thank you very much.
I want to make another announcement before we move on, and that's on April 26th. April's pretty busy with programs. The Department of Neurosurgery is having its second annual History of Medicine and Science lecture, and they're going to have Patrick Radin Keefe on April 26th, and he'll be talking on the 12th floor of the Spine Institute on the UAMS campus. Begins at 5 o'clock, and he's going to be talking about the Sackler family and OxyContin. So that should be a really good presentation as well. So no questions so far. I do have one while we're waiting. So Fort Smith had the first hospital in Arkansas, 1887. Why do you think that Fort Smith got a hospital before Little Rock? Little Rock got one in 1888, just a year later. But do you have any thoughts on why the hospital started there earlier than in Little Rock?
Oh, well, that was just a time of things being done. Famous story about St. Vincent's being built in 1888 as a result indirectly of the cholera outbreak in Memphis. That someone said that if Little Rock was spared from the cholera epidemic, that he would build a hospital, and somebody called his hand on that a few years later.
Yeah, the Bishop of Arkansas, Bishop Fitzgerald, he when and I'm not remembering the names right now, but they put that in their will, and after they passed away, Bishop Fitzgerald went to work and established St. Vincent in 1888. So good for them for putting that in their estate. Well, we don't have any other questions. A few people had to leave because they had meetings, and so I really appreciate you being here. Appreciate Jeffrey Stark for starting the meeting. Again, I apologize for being late, and I really enjoyed your presentation, Dr. Prewitt, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again on April 18th.
Thank you all, and thank you, Tim. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all. Y'all have a good day.